Hello, good morning, students. We are going to learn about the diversity in living organisms. So, in these lessons, we are going to discuss about the living world, the biological classifications, plant kingdoms, and animal kingdom. Okay, so this is the living world. You know that what is living? Living is that particular individuals who possess a growth, reproduction, consciousness, metabolisms, and the response to the environment. So these are some of the special characteristics of living organisms. So let us we understand the what are the living worlds and what are the different types of living organisms are living in this world. So the earth is the home of 8.7 million species of the living beings. Living beings are found in varied habitats like mountains, ocean, forest, lakes, deserts, even a hot water spring. That shows the both inter as well as interspecific ecological conflict as well as cooperative interactions. The life as seen as the felt today can hardly be defined as it described life appeared on earth million of years ago. So the life is now we are having on earth is not only just a part of this present world, it is a sense from the million of years ago, and now that they are evolved and in such a way that all organisms are become so complex organisms. So that first there is a simple organisms like amoeba, bacteria, and the paramecium. But as the evolutions continues, so that there is a variation takes place, and which makes a complex kind of organisms. Let us we understand what is the living. Okay, so first, if we're going to discuss about what is living, the living possesses certain characteristics like the shape and size. So let us we understand what is the shape and size. Shape and size is a living beings have a definite shape and size, and every living beings having a definite shape and size. Living beings have a definite shape and size which get modified to some extent, and that shape can be modified to some extent when growth occurs. So we will observe that growth also in a childhoods whenever it is a baby, that it is so not a so bigger, but as it continues to grow as an adult, so it grows matures completely, so that we observe the growth in individuals, so that at a certain point of time that the growth has been restricted, and that we the page where that growth has been stopped, that we call as the maturity phase. When growth occurs, living beings have been called the morphous with the definite shapes. When the growth occurs, the living beings have been called the morphous. While non-living objects are called the amorphous, no definite shape. And what happens? The non-living objects which are amorphous, that they do not have a definite shape, but the morphous means that the organisms are having a definite shape, and the only living organisms who possess a definite shape. So as it grows at a particular heights of maturity, therefore let us we understand what is the characteristics of growth. Growth is characteristics by increase in the mass and increase in the number of individuals. The growth of a living organisms is an internal and a biological process controlled by the protoplasm. Non-living structures increase their size mostly due to the external factors. Accretion. Organisms grow due to the cell division. Plants for growth shows cell divisions throughout the life. Animal shows growth in up to the certain age. Growth in living organisms is called the intersectional growth and is the end result of metabolism going on in the bodies of all living organisms. So the growth is one of the characteristics of living organisms, which is considered as the increase in the mass of living organisms or particular individuals. So the growth in an living organisms which takes place inside the body, and as well as if you're going to observe the growth in other organisms that can be observed outside of their body, especially on in the non-living objects, especially the stones, the sand mountains, soil mountains, boulders, which shows the external growth is the accumulation of water in a pond. So it is nothing but that the growth has been takes place in the outside of the body, and where that the growth in living organisms takes place from inside of their bodies. Okay, so that is nothing but the called the growth. So we know that the accretion is nothing but the growth from the external factors. Organisms grow due to the cell divisions, and in living organisms especially grow by the cell divisions, because as they grow, so that their cells start dividing, and they supposed to be become a increase in numbers, and in this way that the growth takes place in a living organisms. So animal shows a growth up to the certain age, and we see that up to the age of maturity that the individual which grows fully, and then the growth has been restricted, and therefore that the phase is called as restricted phase or maturity phase. The growth in individuals especially is called the endosuceptional growth, as it is the end result of metabolism going on in the bodies of all living organisms. So that the growth which nothing but that end result of the metabolism going on the bodies of all living organisms. Therefore reproduction, all living organisms have the power of reproduction. It is the capability to reproduce young ones of similar kinds. Organisms may reproduce by asexual or sexual methods. Asexual reproduction, budding, is observed in yeast, hydra. Regeneration is present in planaria, flatworms. Fragmentation is very common in many fungi, filamentous algae, and protonema of mosses. The young ones grow become adult, which again produce the offspring in their turn. Thus, the continuation and multiplication of every individual is maintained to avoid the extinction due to their death. In one or one-celled organisms, growth and reproduction are synchronous. Example, amoeba. Reproduction is not an exclusive characteristic of a living, as some organisms do not reproduce. Example, worker bees, moths. Non-living objects do not increase their numbers by reproducing themselves. So it is said that the reproduction is nothing but a defining characteristic of living organisms, because there are some other living organisms which do not have the ability to reproduce a child. So that it is a characteristic of living organism, but it is not a defining characteristic of living organism. So reproduction is nothing but a power of uh, every organisms having the power of reproduction, that they can have a ability to reproduce their young ones. Hmm. And there are two types of reproduction, especially asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Especially in the asexual reproduction, there is only a single parents involved, and if you're going to think about the sexual reproduction, there is a fusion of male and female gametes, that is called as sexual reproduction. So that asexual reproduction is especially observed in the yeast, hydra, and some of the planaria like animals, especially in plant also. So fragmentation is common in fungi, filamentous algae, and protonema of mosses. The young one grows become adult, which again produce offspring in their turns. So these are called the asexual reproduction. So Thus, the continuation and multiplication of every individual is maintained to avoid the extinction due to their deaths. So, what happens if there is a no reproduction? It means there is a no new organism is produced, so that there would not be any living organism will be having on earth, because there is a sure that at a particular particular time of period of time, that every individual has to be die. But to perpetuate the life, that they need a continuations, and to maintain the life on earth, that they have to reproduce. And because of that, the continuations or perpetuation of life, that has been maintained, and it avoids the extinction of the species from the earth planets. Okay. In one cell organisms, growth and reproduction are synchronous. In one cell organisms, growth and reproduction are synchronous. One cell, that is inside of their bodies. Reproduction is not an exclusive characteristic of living, as some organisms do not reproduce. The worker bees, sterile worker bees, moths. So non-living objects do not increase their numbers by reproducing themselves. So non-living objects do not increase their number by reproducing themselves. So in this way we have discussed reproduction. Now we are going to difference between the metabolism. So the metabolism having a two process, that is anabolism and catabolism. So first we understand the definition. It is a sum total of the constructive process. The anabolism is sum total of the constructive process of metabolism, and the catabolism is a sum of total of destructive process. And therefore energy change, kinetic energy is converted into the potential energy, and in the process of anabolism it requires kinetic energy which convert into the potential energy. So in catabolism the potential energy is converted into the kinetic energy. Okay. Substances, complex substances are formed from the simpler ones. Simpler substances are formed from the complex ones. So these are the anabolism and catabolism process of metabolism. Energy is stored, energy is released. Process required for the growth and maintenance, and the anabolism is required for the growth and maintenance, required for the performance of activities. So catabolism is required to performance and activity. So characteristic of living organisms. So let us we understand the characteristic of living organisms. So in this charts have they shown that what are the different characteristics of living organisms. So the living organisms having a protoplasm, a definite life cycle, and a reproduction, growth, movement, respirations, metabolism, nutrition, and cellular structures, which combine to make one of the living organisms. So let us we discuss about what is the metabolism. See, the human beings, it is a baby, then baby become a child, and child becoming an adult. So it is a process of growth. And the animals, the baby animals, then it is become a child, little bigger, and it is adult animals. So it is nothing but the process of growth in animals. Therefore in the plants, The plants which are also show growth, that it is a plant, one of the plant species, then it becomes a shrub, and eventually it becomes a big tree. So this is a process of growth in plants. So let us we understand what is a metabolism. So metabolism, the protoplasm of a living organisms, is formed of different types of biomolecules which are continuously consumed or synthesized as interchanged by various types of chemical reactions, collectively called the metabolic reactions or metabolism. Metabolic reactions may be anabolic or catabolic. Feeding, digestion, assimilation together constitute the nutrition. Nutrition in an organism results in the production of the more protoplasm, and also in addition in the weight of the body. It is called the anabolism or constructive metabolism. Anabolism is a synthetic phase which results in the formation of complex substances from the simpler ones. Example, photosynthesis is a catabolic. Catabolism is a process of breakdown. Here the complex substances are broken down into the simpler ones. Example, respirations. So respiration involves the taking of oxygen and production of carbon dioxide along with energy. This energy is used for the carrying on various life activities in the living organisms. Metabolic reactions are also possible in vitro, that is a cell-free system. Metabolism is a peculiar characteristic of life, as no non-living object shows metabolism. So the metabolism is nothing but a protoplasm of living organism formed of different biomolecules. Protoplasm of living organism formed by different biomolecules that is consumed, nothing but the food. Okay, metabolism means whatever the food we consumes that has been used and converted into the body as energy, so that that food has been synthesized into the body and which can passes via various chemical reactions. Mm. All that biochemical reactions is nothing but a metabolic reactions or metabolism. So metabolism has a two process, anabolism and catabolism. So the feeding, digestion and assimilation together constitute the nutrition, and these two processes are having feeding means eating the food, digestion means the food which is eaten that has to be digested into the intestine, and then assimilations, and that food has to be passed to every cells of the body and which gives an energy, and together constitute the nutrition, and all these factor which brings the nutrition of an individuals. Okay, so nutrition in an organism results in the production of the more protoplasm. So if we are taking the nutritional diets, that we are taking the carbohydrates, protein, fats, minerals and vitamins, so we have a lot of more protoplasm, and also in addition of weight of the body, and that will enable to have gain the weight. It is also called the anabolism, and this process is also called as anabolism, which is the process of taking a nutritional diets, nutritional foods, or constructive metabolism, that is the breakdown of complex food materials into the simpler ones. We take the food, that food is a very hard and uh, tough, but it is our mouth having a shape, a teeth, that teeth which chewed the foods and which mixes with saliva, which makes it porous ball that can easily goes down into the esophagus, into the stomach. So that the anabolism is nothing but then constructive process or constructive metabolism, in which that the complex food substances which broken down into the simpler ones and passes into the intestines, then the further catabolism process takes place. So anabolism is synthetic phase which results in the formation of the complex substance, which results in the formation of the complex substances from the simpler ones. Therefore, the catabolism, it is a process of breakdown. Here, the complex substances are broken down into the simpler ones. Example: respirations. So, respiration involves the taking of oxygen and production of the carbon dioxide, along with the energy. This energy is used for the carrying on various life activities in the living organisms. Metabolism reactions are also possible in vitro, that is the cell-free system. Metabolism is a peculiar characteristic of life, as on non-living object shows metabolism. So the catabolism is a process of breakdown of simpler food into the complex food into the simpler ones, and that is carried by the respiration process, so that we take the oxygen and expel the carbon dioxide. So in this process, that the carbon dioxide expelled out, and that which makes the complex substance into the simpler ones. This energy is used for carrying on various life activities in the living organisms. Metabolic reactions are also possible in vitro. Metabolism is a peculiar characteristic of life, as no non-living object shows metabolism. No non-living object shows metabolism. So it is a very important characteristic of living organisms, because no other organism shows metabolism rather than the living organisms. Cellular organizations. All living organisms are made up of cells. All living organisms are made up of cells. Numerous organelles of the cell carry out variety of coordinated functions. Numerous organelles of the cell carry out variety of coordinated functions. Cellular organizations is a defining characteristics of living organisms, as no non-living structure has a cellular nature. All living organisms are made up of cells. Numerous organelles of the cells. All living organisms are made up of cells. Numerous organelles of the cell carry out variety of coordinated functions. Cellular organizations is a defining characteristics of the living organisms, as no non-living structure has a cellular nature. So whatever the non-living objects which has a no cellular nature, so that is why this is another very peculiar characteristics of and defining characteristic of living organism, that they have the cellular organizations. Okay, and all their body functions which coordinately works together. Consciousness, then the next thing is a consciousness. The consciousness is an ability of an organisms to sense various environmental, external as well as internal stimuli and respond to them to make a balanced conditions called the homeostasis. So, consciousness is the ability of an organism to sense environmental stimuli such as if there is raining, there is a very thunder, coldness, hotness. Whenever you observe that, you have to adapt in that situation. Either you have to protect yourself from that conditions, that is nothing but in consciousness, to make a balance of your homeostasis. So consciousness is a defining property of all living organisms. Human being is the only organisms who is aware of himself, and only the human or individuals organisms who is conscious. He is aware about himself, that what he is been doing and what he has to do. So self consciousness, the reaction or response by living organisms, and the reactions and response that is been consciously observed by the living organisms. To change in the environment is called the sensitivity, and whatever the changes takes place in the environment, and whenever you are observing that yes, there is a thunder, there is a cold, there is a raining, there is a whatever you are supposed to be experiencing, that is nothing but the sensation, and that is nothing but the consciousness. If you are feeling all that things, you are cautious, but at the same time you are not supposed to stand in that adverse conditions. You have to be adopt, else you have to protect yourself from that conditions while using the different utensils that is been prepared to use in those conditions. Definite life cycle. All living beings shows a systematic and orderly cycle in their lifetime, starting from the birth to death. Life cycle involves the birth, growth, reproduction, and senescence and death. So definite life cycle. Every living organisms are having a definite life cycles. It means for a human individuals, if they are eating well, having doing regular exercises, and having a good state of mind, so they are able to live as long as 100 years or more than that, if they are not addicted with any kind of addiction such as smoking, alcoholism, or any drugs addictions likewise. So they might live not as longer as it is naturally they wanted to be live. So it is depend on every individual, so how long they have to live, as because of it is their choice. Because if you are willing to uh, supposed to willing to addicted, then there is no chance that you can live a longer life span. So if you are leave the addiction and supposed to be remain healthy doing exercise regularly, so it is obvious that you can live a long life. Okay. So in the life cycle involves the birth. At the time that life cycle starts, that is the first the birth, then the growth, then for there is a reproductions, and then the senescence and death. So all these events takes place in the life cycle of an individuals. So first what happens, the birth from the mother, therefore the growth, that individual which grow up to the maturity, and then it marrying, then it will reproduce a new offspring, and then it become aged, sense, and then the death takes place. Movements. Animals are able to move freely from the one place to another place, and the other thing is that the animal can move from the one place to other place so comfortably, as because they are having specialized locomotory organs, legs. Most of the plants do not exhibit the clear movement. They remain anchored to the soil. They show the movement in the form of variation or curvatures. So that we will see that some plants, especially they are strongly held by anchored by the soil, and that they firmly held inside the soil. They are not able to move from one place to other place, but they shows blowing of ears, that movement of the their branches, and therefore that the plants which show the curves in that branches, that can expresses the movement of the plant, such as some plants can make a movement towards the sun, that's the sunflower. So that is some of the indications that the plants can show growth, but it is a very limited. Then the protoplasm. All living beings show the vital activities of the cell due to the presence of protoplasm. Protoplasm has been called the physical basis of life. Protoplasm is called the physical basis of life. Self regulations. A control system works in the every organisms which helps in the regulation of the body functioning like growth, excretion, development, reproduction, and other metabolic activities. Self regulations, that the control works every living organisms, that regulation in the body like growth, excretions, that has a certain limitations, and in this way that which can be restricted at a particular time. So the animal have a nervous and hormonal systems for the self regulation, while the higher plants have only hormonal system for it, and the animals having a nervous system, that nervous systems which enable you to function effectively, such as whatever the work you have to perform, you have the strong nerve coordinations that you have to carry that works, which that works has been, that work will be performed. So it is very important that you have a very good nerve system and nerve coordination, and they're the hormonal systems, and we have the hormonal systems, that whenever we express the feelings, angerness, mood of sadness, happiness, and the crying, so all that which is a hormonals, the fairness, all that has been hormones which released into the body, and that can be makes a coordination with the hormonal imbalance, hormonal balancing. But we have to make the hormonal balance, that it is very important to have a healthy life. While the higher plants have only hormonal system in it, and the higher plants only having the hormonal system in it, means they don't have the nervous system, they only have the hormonal system. Coordinations. All the parts of an organisms coordinate and cooperate with one another for the better functioning of the body. All parts of an organisms which coordinate and cooperate with one another for the better functioning of the body. So what happens, that if we want to do anything works, that your all body which has to be coordinated to carry that works, so that all our cells which help us ourselves to do that works. Genetic material. All living beings bear a genetic or hereditary material in the form of DNA. We having the DNA in the body, that every living organisms which transfer the genetic materials from the parents to their offspring, and the DNA is nothing but the called as genetic material. It is responsible for the expression of the traits in an individuals. Okay, so that if the parents are having curly hairs, that the offspring also having that type of hairs. If the parents are having a black color, so they might appear a black colored offspring. So these are the genetical characters that can be transferred by the DNA. So now we have the adaptations. So adaptation are the variations which helps the living beings to modify themselves and to show the perfect harmony with the changed surrounding. So it is very important for an living organisms to become a survival of fittest, to adjust in an adverse condition of the nature. If any living organisms who adapted in the diverse condition of the natures, so he might live a very long life. As because of that it is very important to adapt in such a conditions, show the perfect harmony with the changed surrounding. Morphogenesis is the development of germinal layer, organs and other parts of organisms. During the process of zygote forms blastula changes into the gastrula, and the gastrula forms the miniature organisms. So this is the morphogenesis, that which takes place the development of the germinal layers. We have the three germinal layers, that is the ectoderm, endoderm and mesoderm. The ectoderm is the upper, then the endoderm is the upper, then the mesoderm is the middle, and the ectoderm is the lower. So in this way we have the three layers of that which makes our body. Our body has been made by the three layers, and the layers which makes the different organs and part of the organisms. During this process what happens, first fertilization takes place which brings the zygotes, and zygotes which turn into the blastula, and blastula change into the gastrula, and gastrula changed into the miniature organisms, and in this way the morphogenesis continues and it becomes an individuals. So